In this video we will learn how to create a Java menu system much like the one that you see here. Basically this will be our finished product at the end of this video. So basically we're using Java to create a simple text editor. As you can see here, this is basically a text area with a JScroll pane in it, but we're mainly focusing on setting up the menu system that you see here. So we have simple menu items. We learn about the JMenu, the JMenuItem, the JMenu bar, and even submenus such as these, even different types of menus such as checkbox menu items, as what you see here, as well as radio button menu items. Further, last but not least, we'll take a look at context menus as well. So we're going to throw a context menu in our text area in this case, so that when the user right clicks, they get this context menu popping up. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, to start, just make sure you have NetBeans running, and we'll start a new project. Simple Java application project will do, and we're going to name that project well, anything that comes to mind. In this case, we're going to use the idea of this text editor, so we're going to call it Java Text Editor. Alright, I'm going to change my location because I've already created it in this location, so I'm just going to throw it in my documents. So name your project Java Text Editor and hit finish. Okay. So this will generate the initial class files for your Java Text Editor project, as you can see here. We're interested in creating in our text editor project is an additional file which will contain all of the code that sets up our UI, and we're going to call that file the text editor UI. Okay, we're going to throw that text editor UI in its own sub package under Java Text Editor. So we're just going to do Java Text Editor.ui. So just append .ui to the default package name that was generated by this project, and we hit finish. So once we have the text editor in place, we'll begin throwing in the code that's necessary to render what you saw earlier. Okay, so we're going to basically create what we just saw, the simple text editor. Well, it really doesn't do anything, so we won't put any functionality in it just yet. But as we progress through this series, we will develop this text editor into a fully functional Java-based text editor. So one of the first things that we need to do is we can optionally throw in all of our imports. I basically have all of my imports that I'll need for this particular class file, so I just threw them in there. This text editor UI class will be our main application window, so I'm going to extend JFrame in this case, so just add extends JFrame next to the class name that you see. And one of the first things that we're going to add, or rather declare, would be our text area class, or rather the reference itself, because this is going to be the main component in the Java text editor that we're developing. And make sure you keep it private, because this is going to be a major aspect of this UI, only accessible by the UI itself. So we start a constructor, so we enter public text editor UI, so it's just an empty constructor. It doesn't need to take any arguments, and we begin the process of building our menu system. Now, Java-based menu systems, they begin with the JMenu bar. So just declare, rather instantiate your JMenu bar using this simple statement here: JMenu bar given a name equals new JMenu bar. Just instantiating it will just create it, but we want to actually set it to the JFrame itself, and the JFrame has methods that are compatible with setting, for instance, components like the menu bar to itself, so it can be displayed in that northern area within the frame itself, and we use the set JMenu bar method that belongs to the JFrame reference. and in that method we specified a reference to our menu bar instance. So this would do the trick in terms of setting the menu bar to our frame. We continue by adding some initializations for our frame, such as set default close operation, set size. We just give it a height and a width, a default height and width. We give it a title. Since it's a text editor, we will give it the title of new document, because typical text editors would usually start up with a default document name such as new document, and then we set visible to true. And now we can get into other aspects such as instantiating our text area. So we use a text area reference that we previously declared above here at line 25, and we instantiate it. Alright. After instantiating, we want to add that text area to the frame itself. So in adding it, we use the add method, but we're going to wrap this in a scroll pane so that we can actually scroll beyond the visible viewport region of the text area itself. So we just wrap and add at once here. So you notice the text area reference inside of the JScroll pane reference here. The JScroll pane will contain the text area, and the JScroll pane will be added to the JFrame using border layout center. That'll give it as much space as it needs in the main area of the application window. Then we can continue building our menus. So to build our first menu, we'll use the JMenu class. We'll give it a name, file menu in this case, and when we instantiate the JMenu, we specify the label that the menu will use. So in this case, since this is the file menu, we give it the name or label file, and the second line here adds it to the menu bar. So we take the menu bar's reference that we just created and set to the JFrame, and we pass to it our file menu reference and tell it to add that file menu reference to itself. So basically we're taking the menu that we created here and we're adding it to the menu bar, which is already set to the JFrame. And you'll find that this is a very repetitive process in terms of adding to other components and so forth. So what we're going to see now is the addition of a JMenuItem. So this is one of the first menu item options, you can say, that will be part of the menu that we just created, the file menu. And this menu item option is called new. So new would be clicked on whenever the user wishes to create a new file. So we use the JMenuItem class, we give it a name, we instantiate it, and we give it a label, new. And once we create that reference, we're going to take that reference and we're going to add it to the file menu that we previously added to the menu bar up here. Alright, so again, this is going to be a repetitive process as we add more menu items. So we're going to proceed to add the open menu item. Same process, we instantiate the menu item, give it a different name, we give it a different label, in this case it's open, and then we're going to add it to the same file menu that we just created and set to the menu bar up here. We proceed by adding a close option as well, because typical document editors will have new, open, close, so we can close the current document if we wish. And we can continue by throwing in other things such as a separator. Sometimes menu options can get very lengthy and we'd like to group them. So the add separator method allows you to throw in a nice separator, and we'll see how this renders. As a matter of fact, I still have the application run here. I can show you real quick. The separator renders as this line between menu items within a particular menu, for instance. So whenever you call that add separator on the menu reference itself, it throws that rendered line in between the options, as you can see here. So let's continue. So we have a few more menu items to add. We'll throw in the save menu item. Again, it's the same sort of approach. Instantiate the menu item, give it a label, and then add that reference to the file menu reference, okay, using the add method. And then we're going to continue by adding another option, save as. So just in case, typical text editors would allow you to save the current document and with the current extension and so forth. Save as would give them options, give the user options in terms of saving it as another type of file, for instance. and then we add another separator just to group those menu items. It helps, it helps users to quickly identify a particular option, especially if you have a long list of options. So do use the separators when you can. Then we continue by adding a final item to this menu called the exit item, and typical applications need to have an exit point, so the user can actually close the application altogether. So this is the menu item that would do this. So our file menu should be complete, and it should look like this. Okay, a complete menu with separators and menu items. So let's proceed. So we are going to proceed to add another menu, and it's the same procedure that we took the last time, but this time our menu is called the edit menu. Alright, it's the same procedure. We instantiate a JMenu object, call it edit menu with the label edit, and we add that edit menu JMenu object to the menu bar that we previously instantiated and set to the JFrame. Alright, so there's a lot of nesting, if you can imagine it. There's a lot of components being added to other components, which are in turn added to other components in this case. So we'll proceed to populate this edit menu with items just as we did before. Create the menu item, undo, create the menu item, redo, and add this menu item, and we can add a separator as well in this case. Again, like I mentioned, separators are good because it helps the user to quickly identify items, especially if you have a long list of items. And then we can add another menu item, cut. So this is basically within the category of editing our document. So these menu items, undo, redo, cut, copy, obviously paste. And then we have another separator here. And then finally we'll have our select all option. Alright, so that's our edit menu in that case. Then we can move on to another menu, but in this particular menu called the format menu, we'll explore different types of menu items. So far we've been looking at the standard JMenuItem, but we'll explore the JCheckBoxMenuItem, so we can throw checkboxes as menu items, as well as the JRadioButtonMenuItem. So we'll see how that works out. In addition to that, we'll look at submenus, so we can actually throw a menu inside of a menu so that it appears as though it's a submenu. So we'll look at all of that. So our format menu will look something like this. So we'll have our checkbox menu item, as you see here, and the submenu, and within that submenu we have our radio buttons here. Now you'll notice that these radio buttons, can be they sort of violate the idea of radio buttons, and the reason for this is that we haven't added a button group as yet, but we'll do that in subsequent videos, just as we throw other functionality into this application that we're building. So we're going to proceed to throw in a JCheckBoxMenuItem. As you can see here, the reference JCheckBoxMenuItem here, it's set up just the same way as a JMenuItem. We give it a label as well, wrap text in this case. And we use the same pattern. We just reference the menu that we're adding it to, and we add it using the add method. Further to that, we are going to start our submenu, which deals with providing options for text sizes, which will in turn be represented by JRadioButtonMenuItems actually. And in this submenu, so adding a submenu is really simple. It's just a matter of creating another menu instance. But instead of adding that menu to the JMenu bar, we're going to add that menu to another menu. So Java understands that if you add a menu to another menu, you basically mean that you're adding a submenu, and it will be rendered as a submenu. So in this case, we created a menu here called text size menu. This is our submenu. We gave it a name or a label, and instead of adding it to the JMenu bar, we added it to our format menu. So we've basically nested a menu in a sense, and that renders as a sub menu. Alright, so here we see a JRadioButtonMenuItem. We call it small text option, and we gave it a label small, and in this case we added this to our submenu text size menu. And we continue by adding other options small, medium, and in this case we're going to throw in, medium text option set selected true. Basically we're saying, we want to have a default selection there right off the bat. So calling our set selected on the menu, on the JRadioButtonMenuItem medium text option rather, we can actually select that by default, so when it renders it shows as though it's selected. Alright, otherwise no radio button will be selected. And then we can continue by adding the final option, final radio button menu item, large text option, and again it's a repeating pattern in terms of instantiation and just adding addition to the particular component that it should display within. So that's basically all we need to set up our menu system so far. So we have our file, edit and format menu set up with a submenu in this case. Okay, so that does it for our menu system. Alright, now we're going to look at setting up our context menu. Now context menus are menus that you access based on what you right click on, and they usually pop up like this. So Java has a class called a JPopupMenu, which you can use to implement context menus. Alright, so we'll see how we can actually get that done. So to implement a context menu, we have to understand the context first of all. We have to identify a particular context onto which we should attach our context menu. So in this case our context will be the text area. So we're actually setting that JPopupMenu on our text area, and you'll see how we can actually attach it in a bit using listeners. So the first thing we need to do is to create that pop-up menu. Alright, so we use just typical instantiation procedures. JPopupMenu, give it a name, equals new JPopupMenu. We don't necessarily need to give it any arguments in that regard, but we did declare it as final, and you'll see why we declared it as final in a bit. Then we're going to populate our JPopupMenu. The procedure to populate JPopupMenus is exactly the same as what we were doing earlier to populate a JMenu. Alright, so in this case we just create a menu item, and again pop-up menus can receive not just menu items, JMenu items, they can receive any other types of menu items such as the JRadioButtonMenuItem or the JCheckBoxMenuItem in this case. So we've created an option called cut, and we proceed to add that to our pop-up menu, and we'll proceed by adding an item called copy, and we'll add that to our pop-up menu. Finally, actually not finally, but the second to last item is paste, and we'll add that to our pop-up menu. And then finally, after a separator, of course, we can add separators as well, we will add our select all option to our pop-up menu. Alright, so at this point our pop-up menu is complete, but it's not attached to anything. So if you right click anywhere in this case, it won't show up. Now what follows here is code that allows the pop-up menu to be triggered whenever it is activated on a particular context. Like we said, the context is our JText area. Alright, so we want the user to activate our pop-up menu whenever he or she right clicks within the JText area region. And to do this, we'll use a special listener. So in this case, we're adding a mouse listener to our text area reference. Alright, we're using a mouse adapter because it's more convenient to override exactly what we want to override. Usually the mouse listener comes with quite a lot of abstract methods that we must override, so we don't want to pad our code in that sense. So we're going to use the mouse adapter to override just exactly what we need to override. And those two methods that we need to override are the mouse press method and the mouse release method. The reason why we're going to override both of these methods is because on some operating systems mouse press works whereas mouse release doesn't, and others the reverse happens in terms. So we need to implement both of them to ensure cross compatibility. So you'll notice that within this overridden mouse press method there is an if statement, and this if statement is pop-up trigger. based on the description of, or based on the label or the name of the method itself, we can imagine what that actually does. So the mouse pressed will only satisfy this particular condition if it detects that it's the pop-up trigger. Now the pop-up trigger is usually the right click on most Windows-based machines. It could be control and click on Mac machines and so forth and so forth. So the pop-up trigger, this condition will be satisfied based on the operating system's context menu activation key. So Java takes care of interpreting that for you. So all you need to do is basically throw that if statement in there, and within the if statement we are going to put our popup.show code. Now this popup.show code, as you guessed it, will show or display our popup, but it will display our popup on the particular context at the particular position of the mouse cursor. So this is why this show method needs the context reference, which is a text area, as well as the current x coordinate and the current y coordinate of the mouse cursor. Alright? So we'll do the same thing for our mouse release method in this case. So we're overriding mouse release, as I mentioned, to ensure cross compatibility in our code, and we're basically going to call that condition again and call the show method again within here. So the reason why we had originally declared our pop-up as final is because we only need one pop-up. We don't necessarily have to modify that outside of the constructor, and more so because we're using this approach to adding a listener to the text area and manipulating the pop-up reference within this particular mouse adapter overridden class itself. So when Java basically allows you to do this, the references that are used inside of this overridden class must be declared final. Okay. Alright, so at this point we are basically finished with the source. We have all of the source code in place to allow us to run and render this as we see here. The final thing that we need to do is to go to our driver class, and we need to instantiate our text editor UI, because as I mentioned, or as you would have observed, the text editor UI is not the main class. It does not have a main method, so we will need to instantiate this class inside of our driver class, which has the main method, so that we can actually see the JFrame itself. So don't forget to do that. So to do this, we are going to have to import a certain package, but we'll let the IDE do that for us. But more so, we have to throw this line in here: text editor UI, which is the name of our class that we just authored. Alright, and we just use a new keyword to instantiate it. Alright, it's going to say that it can't find that, and then it's going to suggest an import for texteditor.ui. The reason why this is so is because earlier on, as you would have witnessed, we threw the UI class inside of its own package called jtexteditor.ui. So once you have this in place, we can then run our application, and we'll see our finished menu system with submenus and different types of menu options, and more so we'll see our context menu when we right click. Alright, so that's it for today.